Okay, we are back to online teaching. Uh, these are the lectures for week 11. I think the last time I taught online was the lecture was numbered 5, and some of the classes have taken on campus, and now we are getting back online. Uh, these lectures are for week 11, and a lot of that have been taken place on the campus uh, would needed to be reviewed obviously from your notes, but for the rest I believe we can have the video lectures for revision as well. So with these online lectures we are going to start with a new technique for circuit solution. Up till now we have used the method of phasor to solve for sinusoidal steady state. So phasor was employed to solve sinusoidal steady state circuit or responses. So if we have a uh, linear network of RLC components or sinusoidal voltage and current sources, and we want to find a response, some current or some voltage in the circuit, then we can use phasor to solve that. However, up till now we have only solved circuits like DC circuits. By DC circuits we mean where the forcing functions are DC. So DC circuits are solved using differential equations, and these were pretty limited type of circuits. So we had simple RL circuits where a single resistor or a single inductor was connected together, and then they were either connected by a voltage source, or the response based on the initial conditions was to be found. Similarly, for an RC circuit, and then we solved series and parallel RLC circuits. So these were pretty limited type of circuits that we dealt with uh, in our uh, in our previous course, linear circuit analysis, in the end chapters. They are very relevant now. You should better revise them to see what we did there. And then we saw how phasors were used in sinusoidal steady state analysis. So this is it. Up till now, we have just been doing these kind of circuits, but in real life, there can be other circuits. There can be much more complicated circuits. For example, say we have a voltage source here, a resistor, and an inductor here, and a capacitor here with maybe another resistor here, with an inductor here, and another voltage source here. And these voltage sources are not sinusoidal sources. So say this is a voltage source that is, say, an exponential voltage source e raised power minus 2t ut. Ut is the unit step function, that is 0 before t is equal to 0 and 1 after t is equal to 0. And say this is a voltage source that is a um, or decaying exponential multiplied with maybe a sinusoidal voltage. And then these are some resistors and inductors. So, can we, by our current knowledge, solve such kind of circuits? No, this is not a DC source. These are not DC sources, so our knowledge of LCA cannot be applied here. And this is not a sinusoidal source. This is not a sinusoidal source. This is not a purely sinusoidal source. It has a decaying exponent multiplied with it. So it is a sinusoid that is decaying with time. So this is also a decaying function. Okay, so let us change this to something which is actually not decaying with time. So let us say we have a t here. So it has a decaying exponent multiplied by a t here. So uh, how is this circuit going to behave? So suppose we are interested in finding this voltage VCT as the result. With our current knowledge, we cannot solve such complicated RLC networks which have more than one mesh or one node, a nodal equation, or one pair of essential nodes. We cannot solve with our current knowledge. We need new techniques. So we are going to look at a new technique that is much more powerful than whatever we have studied till now. In fact, that technique is going to cover everything that we have studied up till now. Plus, it is going to give us power to solve other kind of circuits as well that we have not encountered till now. And it's a very, very important technique. It is going to behave in much the same way as we employed phasor in. So, for example, let me draw these four boxes here to tell you how we are going to employ a technique like phasor and like the one that we are going to study now in order to solve something. So here we are going to have the time domain or the time space. Here we are going to have the frequency domain. And here we are going to have the equations. And here we are going to have the solution. So the problem given to us comes up with equations in the time domain. So for example, they are integro differential equations. One or many. And then we have solution. So suppose it is a single mesh circuit or a single node voltage equation, and we have an equation in some x t as a function of time. Then the solution is going to be finding this xt, an expression for finding the xt. In using some tool like the phasor, what we do, instead of solving in the time domain, instead of going through this path from integral differential equations to the solution, we choose another path. We go from here to here. We convert the problem in the time domain to frequency domain. So we get algebraic equations. This is the whole goal. We are more comfortable with algebra than calculus. So we convert the integral differential equations to algebraic equations. So instead of x of t, say it is some capital T, capital X of some other variable, say s, and we want this conversion to be an easy procedure. And then remaining in the frequency domain, we find the solution, this capital X of s is found, This is an algebraic equation with x of s as the variable, and here the solution x of s is found, and we want this methodology to be easier as well. And then once this is done, we convert this back to this, and usually this is a hard step, and we already know that this step, solving integral differential equation in time, is not an easy thing. Because this is not easy, we have devised this alternate path. So instead of keeping in time domain and solving, taking this hard path to the solution, we convert or transform these time domain equations into algebraic equations in some other domain. There is no t involved in here, so it is no longer in time that we represent the system in. Whatever domain it is, remaining in that domain, we solve and find what that new transformed equivalent of xt is, and then we apply the inverse process of this one, and the resultant solution in the time domain is achieved. This is what we uh, use various tools, or we often term them as transforms, for. So for example, we can call uh, this phasor as phasor transform as well. So when employing phasor transform, we used to have a circuit with sinusoidal sources in time domain. We converted the whole circuit, rather than the equations, we converted the whole circuit to the um, frequency domain, the phasor domain, and then we wrote equations that are algebraic equations in the frequency domain, solve the equations in the frequency domain, and then we bring back the answer in the time domain. And remember, this process was very easy. This was a little harder. This was super easy, but I have written hard here in basically emphasizing that what we are going to study is much more powerful technique, and in that technique, this conversion, inverse conversion, is not going to be easy. It's going to be a bit difficult, and so we you have to pay real good attention in learning whatever I am going to do. A lot of your previous knowledge is going to be used, for example, that you have studied in college as well. So pay close attention, look at the concepts that I am teaching, and if you have some question, then always write them up in the on the Google Classroom page, and other students can answer you. Or if other students cannot answer, I will answer, and we can discuss those problems that you encounter and cannot get past them in an online session on Google Meet once a week. That particular session will be strictly based on demand. So you will write to me that you want to have that session, and then we will have that session. And in these video recordings, um, basically, although I believe that um, uh, an hour of video is equivalent to 2 hours of class, but I am going to take this ratio to be 2 hours of video is equal to, corresponds to 3 hours of class. So using this, basically every week we are going to have 120 minutes of video lectures, and they will be considered equivalent to 3 hours of class. And either I will mark all of you present, because the attendance is not really going to matter. You are going to get marks or grades based on how you perform in assessments, and I believe till now all the assessments have been decided to be taken on campus. And remember, um, you have to take assessments that will be open book or open notes or both type assessments. So if you really understand the concepts only, then you are going to get through in this course. Not because I am going to ask some real hard questions. The questions I am going to ask in assessments will be easy, but they will be unseen. They would not have been covered in class. They would not be there in the book. So you cannot cheat through them, and therefore pay good attention, please. So although I drew this circuit just for reference sake, but let me demonstrate what this process is going to look like here. So just to brush through over some prior concept, let us assume that we had a purely sinusoidal source here, say V1 cos of omega 1t plus theta 1 as V1 volts, and then R1 L1 C, and this source is also sinusoidal. So let us say V2 is some V2, capital V2 value, constant value, the maximum amplitude, and the same omega. These both sinusoids must be of the same frequency for us to be able to solve them together, but they can have different amplitudes and different phases. If they have different frequencies, by the way, then this circuit can only be solved using superposition. Take one source at a time, short the other one, take this one, short this one, and find the solution for both the sources separately and then add together. So if the problem would have been about a sinusoidal circuit, and we are interested in the steady state output only. Remember, when we are interested in a steady state output, we do not consider the initial conditions or the energy already stored in the energy storing elements. Remember, L's and C's are energy storing elements, and if we know the current at any point in time through an inductor and the voltage at any point in time across the capacitor, we know exactly how much energy is stored there, because the energy stored in an inductor is half L I square. So knowing I and L tells us how much energy is there, and the energy stored in a capacitor is half CV square. So knowing V at some point and C can obviously tell how much energy is stored in the capacitor. So if we are interested in steady state responses, we are not concerned how much initial energy was there in the L's and C's. Why? Because that initial energy is going to make the transient response. It is going to decay over time, and the final response or the steady state response is what is going to be purely based on the forcing function. These will dominate the end response. That is why we ignore whether this has some initial energy or not. Again, this is a simplification that we have done, and the new technique that we are going to study right now is so powerful that it can even encompass, or it can even include the initial conditions and the initial energy states of the energy storing elements as well. So for example, in using the phasor, we were given this circuit and we are given with what is to be found. So we need to find an expression for this in the time domain, assuming that our interest in the circuit started at t is equal to 0, and we are interested how the circuit is going to behave after that. Then what we used to do, the first step was the conversion of the circuit in the phasor or the frequency domain. So what we did, we wrote every current and voltage by its phasor equivalent, and we drew the equivalent reactances of in place of the resistances and inductances and the capacitances. So this V1, small v1, will become capital V1 now, and we put a bar here to signify that this is a phasor quantity and this V1 is a value. So V1 and a complex number with theta 1 as the angle, R1 remains R1. L1 converts to j omega 1 L1. R2 remains R2. This converts to j omega 1 L2. Let us call this omega instead of calling it omega 1. So we have omega. C become minus 1 over omega minus j over omega c, and this phasor V2 will become equal to V2 because the frequency is same. We can write this phasor, this in volts, this is volt in ohm, this is also in ohm, everything in ohm, and the voltage across this VC will now be capital VC, and there is no T in here. So this conversion is easy, and this algebraic equations are just application of MCA or NVA here because this has two essential nodes. NVA is more comfortable, so we can take this as reference. We can call this as capital VC, which it is, and then we can write equations like VC minus V1 over R1 plus j omega L1 plus Vc over minus j over omega c plus Vc minus V2 over R2 plus j omega L2 is equal to 0. And solving this, we can easily find what is Vc bar equal to. Suppose it has been solved and ultimately we got this as some VC magnitude and an angle phi. Suppose this is what we got. So we solved the circuit here and then we apply the inverse process and we arrived at VCT is equal to writing this as the magnitude of a sinusoid, bringing back the original omega here, and this is going to be the phase angle now, and this will be the result. So this was what we had been doing till now, where we have the problem in the time domain, convert it to the frequency domain, we write algebraic equations in the frequency domain, we solve it in the frequency domain, then we inverse process it and write the required solution in the time domain. So now in the new technique that we are going to study, we will be needing something the same way, but just to make you remember that how the process actually goes, let me start from some very basic. I hope by flipping the page, the focus that I have taken at that corner is not changed and it does not run into some zoom problems. So let me try it. So let us say let me now again take the focus. I hope it's not changed. It is still that 11.1. The 11 shows it is the 11th week. So here, let me just handle this problem where we have a voltage source. I am not writing what this voltage source is, so it is some function of time. We have an R1, L1, R2, L2. And now I am not only interested in the steady state analysis, but instead in the complete response. So when this is the case, I am also concerned about these currents. So let us say this is I1t and I2t. Why? Because because of the initial condition. So although we want to find VCT, the problem is still the same. But now I must know what are the initial values. So I1 at 0 minus just before our interest has started, say it is I naught 1, and I2 t just before our interest started is I say I naught 2, and VC, the voltage across the capacitor just before our interest started, is say V naught. So we take everything in now. So in purely remaining in the time domain, how we are going to solve this? So let us say we are going to use that NVA method again. So here we have VCT. So what the equation will become? So VCT minus this voltage divided by the resistances was what we used to do in LCA, but here these are not resistances alone. This is a resistance, but this is an inductance. So in writing for NVA, basically we are writing the expression for this current, outward current. So the outward current, so expression for this outward current here is not very easy to write. So NVA is not very suitable here. Let us say, let us then use mesh current analysis. Let us say this mesh current is I1 and this mesh current is I2. So now MCA is a better suit here because of these L's and C's in here. So what do we get here in the first mesh? Minus V1, I'm dropping that t, but it's still a function of time, plus R1 I1t, which is a function of time, plus what is the voltage across an inductor is L1 di1 by dt, plus what is the voltage across a capacitor is 1 over c integral from minus infinity to t of the current through it. And because this element, the C is common in both the meshes, we write it this way is equal to 0. And now you can write the expression for the other mesh, 1 over C integral minus infinity to t of I2 minus I1 dt plus R2 I2 plus L2 di2 by dt plus V2t is equal to 0. These are the two integral differential equations and the variables are I1t and I2t. So can we solve these simultaneously? We need to solve these simultaneously to find I1t and I2t. Can we do this? Can you do this? With whatever you know, you have been through the course differential equations. Can you solve two simultaneous second order differential equations. If we take the derivative of this equation, we can convert this to a second order differential equation in I1 and I2, and this one again as well. So can you solve two differential equations simultaneously and find this? Even if you think you can, it's going to be really, really cumbersome. So it's not possible. So what we actually need to do, or what would easy things up, is suppose we have some operation. This is an operator. If we operate and apply this to this whole equation, it is converted to an algebraic equation. And similarly, when we apply this such a operation on this second equation, it converts to an algebraic equation as well. Then we are going to get two equations that are algebraic equations. And then solving those two algebraic equations simultaneously would be very easy, and we can find, for example, both I1 and I2. And once we find I1 and I2, um, or the equivalent in the algebraic world of I1 and I2, then we can initiate a reverse process to find what they are in the time domain. So suppose this operation on a function of time results in a function, another function. So this is small, this is I am writing as capital to signify, just like phasor. In phasor, the small letters were used for functions of time, but capital for the phasor quantities. Here too, we are preserving that nomenclature. So small functions for functions of time and capital for functions of this operator. So this is some operation done on this, and we arrive with a function that is not of t but of some variable s. And suppose there is a way of describing what the derivative of that function becomes. This is also defined somehow. Say it is some d of s, and then there is a way of describing what integral of f of t is. Say it is some I of s, and let us think, or let us take this as granted for the moment, that this operator, when operated on the derivative of a function whose operation of this operator on it yields f of s, then this d of s is also some function of f of s, and this is also some function of f of s. Then you can clearly see that applying this operator on this expression is going to yield an algebraic equation. So for example, minus v1 is going to become, because v1 is a function of time, we are going to get minus capital V1. Say the capital V1 is for that, or capital V1 of s is a function of s now, not of time, plus, and let us say this is a linear operator. So a const operator operated on this, and the constant goes out of it, and what we are left with is R1, and that operator on I1, which yields I1 of s, plus L1, and here we have a derivative of I1. So we are going to have a function d of s, which actually is somehow dependent on I1 of s. So I1 of s is in here as well. We are going to get back to that later. So, and 1 over c, and we know that we can write these separately by parts. So 1 over c integral of I1 dt minus 1 over c integral of I2 dt. So we are going to get 1 over c integral of I1 is going to yield, say, something like um, uh, I1 of s. Let us not call this I. Let us say it is some e, although e is not there for integral. So we have some e d1 for I1, e1 of s minus 1 over c e2 of s is equal to 0. So you see the derivative vanishes in having a function of s, and the integral also vanishes in having a function of s here. Similarly, if we apply that operator to this one, we are going to have a algebraic equation, and then solving that, solving the two, we will find I1 of s, some function of s, and we will find I2 of s is some function of s as well. And then we would need that last step where we want to convert this to I1 of t by some reverse process. So we get this g of s. The reverse process is going to get us a time function, and I2 of t is going to give us some time function, and we are going to solve this. While this looks very complicated, it's not. Initially, I'm going to explain it in detail, but later on, we are going to see that much like the phasor case, what we are going to do once the problem is given to us in the time domain, we are going to convert the whole circuit in the frequency domain by doing something similar like in the phasor case. However, this is a little more involved than the phasor case. Why? Because the initial conditions here also play a role. So the initial current in the inductor and the initial voltage across the capacitor also play a role. And then we are going to get a circuit nonetheless. And using that circuit, we will just using NVA or MCA write directly these algebraic equations. So we will skip this step. This is a complicated step. This is a complicated process, but we are going to skip this, and we will be able to solve this. Obviously, now without introducing what that operator is, what this operation is, I cannot go any further, but the process should be very clear. The actual process is you still start in the time domain. The operation should be able to convert an integral differential equation or a purely differential equation to an algebraic equation. That is what is required here. So in the next video, I am going to introduce that function. All this process taking us up to the point where right from the start to the end, we are able to do everything is going to require a lot of videos and lectures. So please watch them in a flow, revise them, try to understand each step, the rationale behind it, and so that when finally we are equipped with everything, we are able to solve a circuit in detail. Once again, it is going to take a lot of concepts in there. The final circuit solution would be very easy, but there may come situations where you need all your knowledge of LCA, of algebra, of calculus, of how inductors and capacitors are going to behave finally, and uh, probably other things that you have learned in the college as well, and then you will be able to find the exact solution. You may be wondering that if it is this hard, why we are learning this, but one should know the steps uh, to be taken in order to solve a circuit. Luckily, we are gifted with computers now in this age. There was an age when there was no computer and people have to solve complicated circuits all by themselves. But now it's no longer our job, and computers can solve very complicated circuits using these techniques. But we as engineers basically should be able to comprehend and know what really is going behind it. So, driving a car is not for engineers. We don't call someone who can drive a car as an engineer. However, an engineer knows what goes inside the car, what happens inside the engine, what happens inside the piston, what happens inside the carburetor in the older cars, and what happens inside the fuel injectors and all the other mechanisms. Now we have hybrid vehicles. So engineers know things that a driver is not supposed or expected to know. So being engineers, we must know what is happening at the back end. It's not that if we can draw a circuit in a computer program and then click solve and it solves and find those expressions and values, then we should not call ourselves engineers unless we know all these techniques. So wait for the next video, and I think you should watch it straight away. Back in that video, I may not be talking about circuits because I would be interested in introducing this operation or this operator there in detail, and we will talk about that in several videos before coming back to circuits and solving it. And I'm pretty sure that if your teacher of um, differential equations have already taught you that operator, then my job would be a bit easier.